welcome to Attention Ladies. I am Dr. Dara. I am the founder of Attention Ladies, which is a community for women, specifically Christian women who want to grow in emotional and spiritual health. Every May, I have a mental health series, and right now we have a regular. She comes to our mental health series every year so far, and it has just been such a blessing. So we want to welcome Lachey Creighton, also getting preparing to be a doctor. So I wanted to say Dr. Lachey Creighton. Okay. But she's preparing to get her, or she's getting her PhD right now, but is a licensed clinical social worker and also has a master's in public health from Columbia University, period. She currently practices in New York, and you can share more about your practice to see if you're taking new clients. I'm sure people, after they hear what you have to say, they're going to want to hear more and want to work with you. So yes, welcome, Lachey. Thank you for coming back and being a part of the mental health series with Attention Ladies.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dr. Zara, Dr. Winley, I'll say Dr. Zara. It's wonderful to be back with you and the lovely ladies who often join. And sometimes I know fellows are on too, but as we're greeting the ladies, it's wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful to be invited. Like you said, it's been a few years I've been able to join your May series, so I'm honored. I know that throughout the past years, we've been able to touch the hearts of many folks, not just women, but many folks. And so I've heard great feedback. So whether people comment, obviously when we're doing a live, or people follow up, it's just been exciting for me just to kind of hear what's happening and to be able to support in this way. You know, we live in a very wide world right now where we can send a message across the seas, and people have Instagram and Facebook and they're online, and so you never know when you're dropping gems how far it'll reach. And so I thank God for you. I thank God for your platform and the amazing work that you are doing on multiple spheres and in multiple realms.
Thank you
So
so
I'm grateful for you as well. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So we are going to jump right in. Today, we are introducing breath work to the Attention Ladies community, and really emphasizing the importance of breathing and taking care of your body this series. So yes, Dr. Creighton will be sharing more about that. So we're going to first start off, though. My first question to you is why mental health is even important,
Yeah.
and especially to share this with Christians in particular. There's been like this new, trending topic around mental health in our generation, and specifically emphasizing like Jesus and mental health. And so I want to hear from your experience just as a believer, but also as a clinician, why Jesus and mental health is important.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. And one of the reasons why I often get this question, Dr. Zara, is because I have an organization and a nonprofit called Black Christian Therapy. And so, just exactly what you said, the basis of the two. And I like to say that they're not opposites, they're not mutually exclusive. So, while we're adding and we're talking about them conjoint separately, really they're all together. I have never seen an aspect of mental health being separate from the spiritual work. I've never seen spiritual work being separate from mental health as a believer. So I grew up where we might not have said the words, depression or anxiety or something like that. I came from an old school grandma from Louisiana. So she would often say, baby, you working my nerves. And that was her way, and you would see it in her behavior. And that was her way of saying, I feel anxious, like calm down, everybody calm down, right? So I think sometimes we're using big words, and obviously both being in academia, you as a professor and researcher, we're using all these big words, but they're really not new. Nothing about mental health as it pertains to a Christian or a believer is new. Nothing to the human soul as it pertains to mental health or the psychological aspects of life is actually new. We're seeing kind of these buzzwords around mental health, or Jesus in therapy, right? There's all these different organizations or different movements, but nothing is new under the sun. When Jesus told his disciples, wait here while I go pray, I'm sure there was forms of meditative practices in there, right? When you're praying, you're actually meditating. We know from the science and from the data that when you pray and when you worship, literally the lifting of your hands, those movements have been studied at Harvard University in our power poses that literally they can see from from brain scans that you are having an emotional response from it, and that you actually feel more empowered. Worship, speaking in tongues, right? All of that we can see from the data that it changes the structure in which information travels through your brain. So we're now seeing this kind of spin on it in the aspects of pathology and psychology and counseling psychology and all these fancy buzzwords, but they're no different than what God has told us and what the believers of old have told us already in the Bible. When Jesus says, "Stay here for a while I go pray," he was obviously by himself meditating, talking to the Father, right? That's definitely changing the way information, calming his nerves. We know from the science that when Jesus was going to the cross, the Bible says that he literally sweated blood, which we know can actually happen. It's very rare, right? But it's this high intense level that is actually right. There's actually something can happen that's a high intense level of anxiety. So when the Bible tells us that is not experiencing anything that we ourselves have not experienced or will not experience, he literally has not, right? He struggled with loneliness. The Bible says that he was a man who couldn't find a place to lay his head. The Son of Man has nowhere to rest, right? That might not necessarily be anxiety or depression, but you can't act like that a person won't have bouts of sadness if the Bible's literally telling us that he has nowhere to rest, right? Like that's one of Maslow's needs, that we would have those places to rest physically, emotionally, and all those things. So it's very clear in the Word of God that mental health is something that's very important to God. And of course, it was something that was prioritized in Christian community in the days of old. And of course, if you're in community now, you know it's a direct need. So nothing new under the sun.
That's so good. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that and really emphasizing the importance of Jesus being a human and what it was like, what it must have been like for him to also experience a lot of the symptoms that we experience, in our mental health and caring for ourselves. So thank you for tracking that, through scripture. And I hope people can go back and refer to those verses.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So leading into that, when we're thinking about all of the different intense emotions that Jesus must have felt that we currently feel, there is the concept of breath work, and taking care of your body through breathing and having intentional deep breathing exercises. And so I just want you to shed light on one, what that is, and also why is that important for the believer? Because I think right now sometimes people are skeptical about a lot of like these new
Yes.
bits and practices, and they're like, okay, is this Christ like, what's going on, right? Like, how do I categorize this? So I want to hear from you, sort of, how did you get into this and what it is, and how does that relate to your work as a believer?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question, Sarah. Because for me, I mean, even when I first heard of breath work or yoga or something like this, I would be like, I'm good. I come from old school Baptist church. We don't dabble in that stuff. We don't play with that stuff. You don't play with spirits. You don't introduce anything in that you can't handle. You don't even go into the enemy's territory, right? Unsent. So I really didn't play with that stuff. I think the difference is, and it's so important to note this. And so I really want, as folks are listening and listening in, the importance of emphasizing that breath work in and of itself is not actually connected to any religion. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily connected to Christianity. It's really a process, a psychosomatic way of breathing, right? So that autonomic nervous system, you're just calming your nervous system down, and you're sending signals of safety, because when we're hyper aroused or when we have experienced trauma, our bodies have to learn to be safe because our bodies have learned to be unsafe. And so the first thing about breath work is to realize that it's not particularly connected to any one religion. And again, not even Christianity, I think, owns the rights, quote unquote, to breath work, right? So it's a method and a form of breathing from the diaphragm. Athletes, individuals who maybe are dancers, this is something that they actually have learned to do as a skill and a discipline very naturally. So if you're a runner, you have had to learn, like probably long distance, right? In sprinting as well, you've had to learn how to carry your body in such a way that equips you for the longest distance or the best run. That's no different than anything else that's necessary in life, right? When you wake up, you don't hold your breath. When you wake up, you allow yourself to breathe naturally. And then when you feel the need, you will, of course, right? You will purpose yourself to breathe, right? Actually, breath is one thing that we do in our body automatically and that we can choose to do. Everything else tends to be one or the other, right? So babies do this naturally. If you've ever witnessed a baby breathing, you see their chest, their diaphragm goes up As they inhale and as they exhale, their diaphragm comes in. You see this very naturally. So this is I wouldn't even say that it's something special or unique. It's just the proper way to breathe. Like we should all be walking around breathing like this. This is the proper way to breathe. Throughout life, we learn incorrect ways of being. We learn incorrect ways to breathe, right? I would even put it under we're born into sin and shaped in iniquity, right? We come from a fallen world. All of us are in a fallen world. We are not Adam and Eve, we are their descendants, right? So we were shaped and born into a fallen world. And so a lot of the things that we have to reteach ourselves, like meditation, to pray, it's not particularly natural to sit down for hours to pray, right? But Jesus did that, others did that, right? You discipline yourself to do it. And so I would say breath work is the same thing. You discipline yourself to be as well as you can be. And so there are a few baseline techniques to breath work. One of the main things that you want to focus on, if you do not have any pre-existing diseases or illnesses, such as hypertension or blood pressure, or although this is not a disease or illness, but if you're pregnant or expecting, I would say maybe sit this out. So maybe not approach breath work right now. One of the main things or baseline places that you want to start with breath work is to just find a comfortable position. Like now, I'm sitting in my chair, I'm relaxed, I have a flat back. I'm not particularly focused on one way of being with breath work. I think that's not realistic. And that pushes the idea that the environment or the setting has to be perfect for you to take care of yourself. And that's not realistic for most of us. And so sometimes I'm finding myself in my home, in a chair, on the floor, outside, wherever I need to be or whatever I have access to in that moment. This is also important for me to note there because a lot of times when we talk about mental health, we talk about mental health very stush, very uppity, right? If you don't have access to a certain gym, you don't have access to this high class therapist. Sometimes people are on Medicaid, sometimes they have to do pro bono work, and you got to work with what you got. And so, breath work is something that we all have access to. Wherever you go, you have your breath. And so I focus on finding a base place, somewhere that I can sit straight up, I can relax my body. Sometimes I'm laying down, but generally I try to have a flat back. I don't want to be slouched or hunched over. I try to focus. I drop my shoulders. This is key, right? Because a lot of times when we hold tension in our bodies, and where are we holding it? We're holding in our chest and our shoulders. And you as a clinician, you know when you're getting on the line with clients, sometimes they're like, hey, how you doing? You're like, how you doing? That's the question. You can see they're scrunched, they're tight, right? And by the end of the session, you've done what you came here to do. You both have, you can see they're falling. So we know you don't have to be a therapist to know that people hold tension in their chest. And so I purpose myself, this is the discipline that comes along with it. I purpose myself to drop my shoulders and I just feel the ease. I am using my senses, the beautiful five senses that God has given us, and allowing my senses to lead, right? If you're experiencing anxiety or high pressure situations, you're probably having to think a lot. And thinking a lot is a lot of work, right? And women have more thoughts, thousands of more thoughts a day than men. So we're doing a lot of thinking and processing. And what breath work gives you, dear, is the opportunity to slow down. It's such a wonderful gift that you can give to yourself.
Yeah.
I purpose myself to drop those shoulders. I sit back, I might close my eyes. I might drop my neck a little bit just to take some tension off my neck. And closing your eyes is a choice. You know, that depends on the person, whatever you're comfortable with. If you've experienced trauma or you've had situations where that has felt unsafe for you, that might not be the first step. So I encourage individuals to find what a baseline, I'm coming back to that phrase again, that word baseline again, and finding that baseline for what's comfortable to you. Sometimes what happens is, especially if we have these very stush or uppity ideas around what mental health is supposed to be, you know, everyone's looking for chimes and bells and whistles and extra thing. And again, not a reality for a lot of people. Maybe your children are working your last nerve and you have to just stop where you are. You don't have time, you know, as a mom, as a caregiver, whoever, as an auntie, whatever. You don't always have time to drop and melt. There are plenty of days. I'm a mother, a wife. There are plenty of days, darling. I can't just, my husband can't be talking to me and I'm dysregulating and I just stop and hit the ground. He'd be like, girl, like, woman, if you don't, what just happened, right? It would throw him off. So you might have to find that place of baseline where you are and you don't close your eyes. You just taking a few deep breaths, or you might take a sip of water and taking a few deep breaths. I want to emphasize the access that everyone has to this. As I find that baseline place, I go ahead and drop my neck just because that's comfortable for me. That's where I tend to hold tension. And I take in a deep breath through my nose. And as I'm taking in, I invite you all to join us. This is again something that you can do with us as we prepare to do breath work. I take in a deep breath in through my nose. And even as I'm experiencing taking in this breath, I'm exhaling and my diaphragm, so my midsection, my torso is all pulling back in as I exhale. And I'm allowing that breath to just kind of be, right? Like I might touch my face, I might touch my shoulders, I might touch my neck, like wherever I might feel that tension. And for a lot of people, that sensory aspect of touch sends a signal of safety to them. Sometimes I touch my chest, right? I might hold my neck. It might give myself a little massage. These are all components. I'd like to do facial massages, like, right? See the tension move from my neck, my shoulders, jawline, right? You're paying attention to your body. And again, you're giving yourself the gift of slowing down. I live in New York City, I live in Harlem, and it is fast paced. There's always something going on. There's noise pollution, obviously traffic pollution. Always something going on in the city, right? But again, I don't even want to overemphasize that. Wherever you are, can be always something going on in one way or the other. So I give myself the gift of slowing down. And that's the basis of breath work is the mindfulness and the concentration. And I allow my senses, right? Because to take the lead, I could just be present. I might let my feet be flat on the ground. And I might ask myself, what do I feel underneath me? Do I feel the flatness of the ground, the coolness? I focus on those things. What do they remind me of? Do they remind me of safety? A lot of times in breath work, I find myself there thinking about childhood, thinking about my grandmother, who is the main caregiver in my life, who raised me, my papa, her husband, who raised me. I find myself thinking about those wonderful times, my parents growing up, my mom dancing with me on a Saturday, while she's cleaning, teaching me, all these different things. My mom used to put me to bed. I didn't have like bedtime stories or lullabies all the time. My mom used to put me to bed on Anita Baker, right? So I grew up listening to her. One of her songs was called Fairy Tales, right? So I remember those things, those warm things. And sometimes in breathwork, Tara, we think about things that aren't so good that are coming to mind, things that we have been holding that we haven't had the chance to really explore.
Yeah.
As a breathwork facilitator, trained facilitator, I was taking my training in what was being done, the breathwork that was being done with me. This was probably around the pandemic, maybe a little bit into the pandemic. I realized I hadn't really grieved. I was having a child, my first child. I realized I hadn't really grieved the loss that I had experienced. Thankfully, I didn't have anyone pass away, but I hadn't grieved the loss of expectations from the pandemic. And all of a sudden, I just began to cry. I felt overwhelmed and had to regulate myself. But obviously, afterwards, I was like, I needed that. I never really took the time to say, wow, this is really hard. My parents can't come visit me. I don't have, my auntie down the street baking me a cake, and I don't have family in New York. So it wasn't like I had this experience that I expected to have when
Yeah.
having my first child, and I hadn't really grieved that. For some people that's not important, but for me it was. And so I realized, wow, when I slowed down, I had a chance to figure out what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and what I not purposely have been ignoring, but obviously in many ways had repressed.
Yeah, I think I love how you are tying in like experiences with trauma and how that also might play a role in your inability to like slow down and like kind of process and sit with yourself too, and how this could be useful, a useful tool for people to kind of process that. I am wondering about the people who, like you were kind of talking about, like the hectic schedules, there's so much going on, there's not a lot of time. It sounds nice, and it sounds really amazing to like kind of
Feel
yourself, right? But like there, for some people in their reality, I'm just thinking about some of my own clients, it's not, there is really no time for them. And so how would you encourage them to make time? Right. Because I do think that this is one of the things, like a lot of the things we talk about with self-care and being intentional about, reading the word and like different things like that, building a
yeah.
community, that we have to be intentional about that. So what would be some suggestions for the woman who is overwhelmed and is working through a lot of their own trauma internally, and needs to figure out how to place this in their schedule?
Absolutely. That's such a wonderful question. I believe that we overcomplicate mental health. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, unless you had a lot of money, you didn't have access to psychiatrists and psychologists. It wasn't a thing like that. You probably saw it in more higher income environments, right? Regardless of probably, and certainly if you include the aspect of race beyond social class, just race, right? The world is very different. We lived down the street from my aunties. I grew up in a Black enclave. Everybody on my block owned their home. Everybody on our block shared food. My grandmother had a plum tree, a peach tree, a lemon tree, and my neighbors, the Flippins, they had apple trees. Like everybody, you share. You had everything, greens in the backyard. Like that was the way that we were. So if I came in from school, my parents lived down the street, like it was nothing, right? If I came in from school and switch houses because I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, I could have a snack here, do this here. My godmom was across the street. I could talk through all these things on a regular basis. It was a very nurturing and safe environment. And obviously, this is not unique to where I grew up. In many parts of the world, this is still the norm, right? But the world looks very different here in the US especially if you're in coastal regions, right? I don't think it's particularly unique to just outside the US. We still have a lot of these type of communities and environments, but they've certainly shifted even across the board around the world. And so I think we have to be honest about where we are, right? That you might not be in an environment where, like you said, you could really slow down, where you could safely slow down. So many mothers, fathers, caregivers, friends, whoever, you don't always have the opportunity to melt. So I think your point is true there. But then I think there's this other component where we overcomplicate this. You might not have 30 minutes to dedicate to a workout, to a breathwork session, to a meditation session, but you have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes. If you need to do some breath work while you sitting on a stool handling business, then do what you need to do, right? Do what you need to do, because nobody's coming along reminding you to eat, but you realize you need to eat. No, sometimes you're eating as you're rushing and running. I remember when I first moved to New York, I thought it was just like you're eating on the subway. Like this place is dirty. You look around, everything. I couldn't even imagine. Darling, I have a 4-year-old. Listen, when it's time to pick up and we got to run errands to run, I pack snacks that are acceptable for the subway. Obviously, I'm not pulling out a fish dinner, collard greens, and cornbread, right? But let me tell you, he's gonna have his little bomba bags, his goldfish, right? And I have my wipes ready, right? Because that's what I need to do in order to get the ball rolling for the day. Sometimes that's how it is. That's just how it is. Sometimes we're praying, we're doing our morning prayers while we're brushing our teeth. And that's called habit stacking. That's a form of dialectical behavior therapy if you're working with a therapist and you want to know. Sometimes habit stacking is very good. Actually, this is a very good technique there, as you know, for individuals who may have ADHD. Sometimes that's why you have fidget spinners, or some of those things are very helpful because they sometimes have to combine things with things, right? Like you might need to do your workout while you're doing the dishes, and that actually helps you concentrate more or focus more, right? Even though ADHD is not always a byproduct of not being able to concentrate or focus, maybe other things going on, right? But the habit stacking is very good in building what's called a keystone habit. There could be very wonderful. I grew up where I would see my grandmother, my grandfather, particularly my parents too, but particularly my grandparents from that generation. When they got up in the morning to pray, they would get out of their bed and drop to their knees on the side of the bed. I specifically remember my papa sitting at the bed like this, and that's how they knew to pray. I don't remember them necessarily throughout the day doing that again, but they always did that in the mornings. And so as you're building those habits, whether you take 2 minutes to 3 minutes, it was honorable for them to stack that habit of getting out the bed while they pray. I don't always get out my bed and lean. I get out my bed and lean on the bed and pray like that in the morning. Sometimes I'm waking up with a song on my heart and in my spirit. Sometimes, my alarm clock, literally, my husband's too, his alarm clock is a sermon, a prayer from a pastor. And that's how he wakes up. Yes, the pastor's actually from Chicago. He wakes up to the prayer, and it's beautiful. It's such a delightful way to wake up. Set your alarm to a gospel song that will get you in, get your spirit right. Go to bed to a gospel song, and maybe that's the time that you have to pray, right? And then of course you push yourself. What you do is it's called increasing your window of tolerance. And so as you do that, you'll do more, right? A little bit more each time. It's like building a muscle. So I don't recommend people beating themselves up or feeling bad that they can't be where they would like to be, but I believe you can start somewhere. I think it's Anne Frank said, the beauty of change is that it could start now.
That's good. Come on with the Anne Frank comment. I love that. I love that. That's so good. That's so good. Thank you for naming that. And like again, you're mentioning important themes of like preparation,
Yes.
and being intentional and making it happen, right? Like doing what you can within the resources that you do have. I'm thinking about this is my last question around this is, people who are like, okay, I'm trying breath work and I have this trauma response, and I'm by myself, so maybe I'm sitting here and I'm releasing and I'm feeling the memories and, coming in contact with the feelings that I felt in my body, and really taking that time. So when they're having that traumatic response,
Mhm.
what would you suggest that they do just for their own self-care? And
Mhm.
then also, are there any particular therapists that they should like reach out for or like or research to help them assist them in this particular area of breath work? Are there breath work therapists? Like, what would be the way that they should find someone to help them in this area?
Yes, absolutely. Excellent question because we're not always honest about trauma. I think the idea around trauma is again, it's a cute little jazzy buzzword where you could just throw around, oh, because I have trauma, oh, because I have this. People walk around saying, oh, I'm bipolar. That stuff is no joke. It's nothing to play with, right? And you even want to be careful with how you're labeling yourself. My brother struggled with schizophrenia his entire life, or is his entire adult life, I should say, right? And it was very hard for me, especially coming from a Christian background, to just let that come out of my mouth. I mean, to the day I would say he had a vulnerability, so remember, like you said, like this is your mental health. We see as clinicians, we're not experts, and therapy is not a hard science. I don't care what nobody say. It's not, you can't do a litmus test and it comes out blue and this is diabetes, or this is this. Even some diabetes are reversible, right? So I think we have to be honest of our limitations as mental health professionals and not move in our own ego. It's a lot of power that comes with it. And so I encourage people to know thyself, right? I think it was Shakespeare who said, "To thine own self be true." Right? You know aspects of yourself. Sometimes you don't know aspects of yourself. But if you're hearing this and you're deciding to engage in breath work, set a timer, set a limitation, set it that when your breath work is finished, you'll be able to call somebody, and that person should expect your call in 10 minutes, right? To do a follow up. Prepare yourself that you have room to explore what your feelings were. Set within your breath work time to journal afterwards. You can prepare by finding a therapist who does maybe dialectical behavior therapy, which is these are all different type of modalities that they can help you with skill building around how you prepare for your mental health, right? And if you don't have access to a therapist who is a trauma informed therapist, which I would certainly recommend, who has experience working with individuals with trauma, then you can connect with a pastor, a priest, a leader, someone that you just look up to. It doesn't always have to be, you won't always find these things sometimes in some faith communities. And we should be honest about that too, that there are sometimes pastors or preachers are operating outside their scope of practice, right? Whenever I work with a lot of pastors and I train them on different aspects of mental health and how to work with their congregation or their parishioners, and it's pretty much every single time that every pastor tells me they wish they had more counseling classes in their programs, in their master's programs, or if they are a pastor who's not trained formally, that all the time they tell me they wish they had more experience in counseling and psychology. And so I encourage folks to start where they are. Don't overthink this. If you're preparing yourself to do breath work, and I know we'll do some before we close out our time today, if you're preparing yourself to do breath work, you want to start with setting expectations around it and setting up what it is that you hope to receive from the breath work. And if you know you've experienced trauma, and if you're or if you don't, or if you haven't and those things come up, you should still prepare for it like you would prepare for anyone else. Finding a lifeline, finding support, whether it's journaling, taking a walk. You could do your breath work while you take a walk if you can, right? You find ways to be well. I'll always say, come back to your baseline.
So good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Again, I think this is helpful for those who are skeptical about breath work and what the origins are and why, why Christians like getting into this. I think it's really important to lay a foundation and, to speak about your use of it. And also helping people think about how to incorporate this in their life. And so I remember when you did these IG lives and you would have breath work in the morning.
Yes.
And I think it was like
Yes.
around the pandemic time.
Yes, and following, but I ended up having another baby. So,
Right.
that's actually why I slowed down on it because I just couldn't get up that early or have the same capacity, but
That
absolutely.
was so helpful. I had friends in Chicago who were like joining and like saying how helpful that was just to start off their day and like then they go into their own prayer time and so it was just like okay, this is really good. So I really do want to use the rest of our time to have 3 to 5 minutes to do some brief, deep breathe breath work. Why can't I say this? Breath work with the community now, just so you all can get an experience with a clinician who is specializing in this and also take time for you in this moment as well. So, again, thank you all for watching. This is Attention Ladies. We're in our mental health series and we're getting ready to engage in breath work with Dr. Lachey Creighton.
Yes, yes. It's so funny because all it's always encouraging because people add that. It's so natural to add that and it culturally, right? We do that to encourage. So I appreciate the love. So we'll do some more formalized breath work. I'll add this piece before I get going into breath work there. Again, breath work is not specifically connected to Christianity or any one group. In fact, you can find this as something that exists in multiple regions, whether they have a specific word for it, right? So I like to make that clear because sometimes what happens is other movements can hijack what don't nobody own, right? We call it Columbusing, or people can just put a new title on it and call it something else, right? When like people already existed here, multiple groups of people existed here. They were like, right? I'm saying here because we're in the US, right? Like right? People were here. So Columbus didn't actually discover America. He was actually one of the last people to actually arrive, right? There were already African people, people of African descent, they're obviously native people, right? Like so I don't want to do this thing where we're talking about something new or new age or something that's so high tech, like no, this existed, is free, you have access, right? It's your breath that goes with you. Okay. This is just the proper way to breathe. Okay. But the aspect that we're adding to it and why we call it breath work is because it's facilitating a process. You're somewhat a practitioner. So without further ado, we'll jump right in it. Just finding that comfortable place. Again, I'm choosing to close my eyes because it's helpful for me. I'm taking my right hand because I'm right-handed and I'm letting it rest on my chest. And I'm just kind of patting my chest. I'm syncing myself to the beat. Right? For me, this feels good culturally. A beat symbolizes rhythm, rhythmic aspect to life, like rocking and leaning. Those are all therapeutic ways of regulating. Nothing new. You probably witness your mom or your grandmothers or your dad. Loved ones rock and lean and sway as a means to regulate. So I'm choosing to focus on my breath. I'm seeing a breath come in through my nose as my belly extends. I hold that breath and I exhale as my belly exhales. It pulls in like a dancer or an athlete or a small baby. Breathing in again, I'm holding that breath. I'm reminding myself that this is a moment that I have for me. It's a gift that I'm giving myself, something that I have access to always. I'm exhaling. Taking in another deep breath. Exhale, dropping those shoulders. I'm not requiring anything special of myself right now or anything unique. I'm just allowing myself to be. Feeling good in my body, feeling good in my spirit, just allowing myself to be. Going back to maybe touching my face, my neck, my shoulders, whatever feels good for you. If you don't do that at all, maybe you tend to fidget or feel anxious so that you need to do something with your hands. Maybe you choose to sit on your hands as you're taking in deep breaths. I like the sensation that I feel in my body. I feel myself as I take in those deep breaths. Feel that sensation and it feels good. Reminding myself that I'm giving myself something that no one can give me, which is time. No one will ever be able to give me as much time as I can give myself. Sometimes you find yourself sleepy or tired in breath work, and that's not bad. That's actually your body sending a signal that you're more relaxed. You struggle with anxiety, sometimes it's hard for you to settle yourself. And so, this is a discipline of increasing your window of tolerance. The more you do this, the more you'll find yourself wanting to do it, desiring to do it for the most part, and being able to do it for longer. Deep breath in through your nose. Something that's helpful in breath work, if you're not working directly with a coach, is you can play soft music in the background. I tend to stick with music that is instrumental without words. And you can lead and guide yourself in breath work. You can tell yourself affirmations. One of my favorite affirmations to speak over myself is from a scripture. It says that God's banner of love is over me. So I don't say you, I say me. I insert myself. I remind myself that all things are working together for my good because I love the Lord and I'm called according to his purpose. I remind myself that life is a gift. It's a gift to move my body, to have my being in him, to live and move and have my being in him. And so I might say those things and remind myself of gratitude as I take in deep breaths. So continue your breathing. And you notice that I've softened my voice, right? Because for me, that's most comfortable. My ears are sensitive to loud or sharp noises, as I'm someone who experiences hearing loss in both ears. So the calmness of my voice as I speak to myself also sends a signal of safety to me that in this moment, it's only my job to be present, to be in the moment. You may feel lightheaded at times. You may again feel tired or sleepy. I encourage you to press through unless you're really lightheaded or that it can become unsafe for you. In that case, stop, take a break. Otherwise, continue your breathing. It's also okay not to talk. Obviously, I'm facilitating this time, so I'm talking more, but it's also okay not to talk. It's okay to just be. We'll take in a few more deep breaths, and then we'll come back together. Just take a moment and tune into your body. What do you feel? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? Being able to ask yourself those questions is called grounding. And that helps you regulate, that helps you understand you're firmly planted. The world is not moving or spinning. And even if it is, you are standing still. You are safe and you are present in this moment. We'll take in a last deep breath and then we'll come back together. Inhale through your nose. As you inhale, your belly should protrude forward. Now exhale through your mouth. And as you exhale, you should feel your stomach, your midsection, your torso come back. And that, my friends, is breath work.
Yes, thank you. I was about to knock out for a second, okay?
Excellence.
Just like what you said, you notice how what your body is feeling, and like I felt a lot of fatigue and
Mm.
sleepiness. So yeah, thank you for for doing that. And I hope you all took away something from that as well. Thank you, Shay. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, darling. Absolutely. It's always a joy to be with you all. You know how much I love you, how much I appreciate your work, how much of a wonderful friend and support that you have been to me, my family, and everyone, and even in my own work. So it's wonderful to not just have a friend, not to not just have a colleague, right? But to also have a friend. So I'm grateful for you for the work that you do.
The exact same way. So thank you again for being here. You all, if you want to follow her, please go to Black Christian Therapy. It's an amazing resource. I'm located on it as well. If you need a therapist in Chicago,
Yes.
yes, please check out her resources and her Instagram page as well. And is there any other resources or upcoming things that people should be looking out for?
Yeah. So we're still working. We're actually taking applications now. We have so this is kind of 3 years in the making, a little bit post-pandemic. So we actually have it's called Black in Therapy, a show coming together, probably a YouTube, Instagram show coming together where we're talking to people about what it's like being Black in therapy. So we definitely want you to check out our page. You can go to blackchristiantherapy.org. Like Dr. Dara said, we have the resource up where there's a directory. So you literally can type in your zip code and find therapists in your area. And if you are a therapist, please go ahead and check out our therapist directory. Right now, it's still free to join. It won't always stay that way, although some will be grandfathered in. So definitely go check that out. And then, of course, there's resources and articles on the website. I also have an article on therapy for Black girls about spirituality and mental health. So check that out. Of course, sometimes we're doing IG lives and things like that. Sometimes that could be a little bit more sporadic, depending on what's happening. But we're certainly posting, we're certainly putting out information to demystify and destigmatize mental health and faith. So please check us out. Again, blackchristiantherapy.org for our website and Black Christian Therapy on all major social channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. And also, please stay tuned to Attention Ladies. You can find that on Instagram and also my YouTube page, Dr. Darren Windley, just for upcoming series or upcoming lives and interviews in the mental health series. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you at the next one.
Yes.
Bye.